persons with visual impairment. And therefore, we need to make public spaces, websites, and documents accessible by providing content in format such as braille, audio, or large prints. It is important to note that. And the second one is hearing impairment. And here, mainly, we need to find platform and provide framework to ensure that the Kenyan Sign Language interpreters, subtitles, and transcripts in videos is available for them. Then another key area is around mobility. I have not captured in the slides, but mobility impairment is very important. We have people who don't have they don't have hands. So they need like the mouth stylus and other platform for them to be able to access and use information. So important to note that. Digital accessibility is a key thing. And as Kenya, we continue to embrace technology. The other day I was told that we almost leading as a country in Africa. With the leading when it comes to the use of the internet. We managed to put Nigeria behind and South Africa. And with that, we must ensure that persons with disabilities are not left outside in accessing the content. So we know the Web Content Accessibility Guideline, WCAG, is guiding us globally on how to make this happen. But again, we have the CAPE standard that was done way back, 2952. Enable is here, is spearheaded that. But it is so complex. So we need to make it easy for interpretation and for many institutions and the people to use and adopt it. Each laptop has accessible platforms to make our PDF, Word, PowerPoint, presentations, those documents accessible. And I can give you, if you have a laptop, just go to the file, then you go to info. From the info, you click on the info, you go to the accessibility. And with that, you're able to make your PDF document, Word document, or PowerPoint document accessible, so that screen readers are able to really perceive that and make persons with visual impairment be able to use. Of course, understanding the disability inclusive communication is ensuring that person's first language is embraced. Person's first language. So how do you make a person, a child with a disability, who is familiar with communicating with the mother or the people around them, the caretakers, be able to access the information? Or all those persons with disabilities who only are familiar with their first language. We must be able to see how we can be able to embed and come up with solutions to address that. Gender neutral and inclusive language is also another area. And of course, we need to mind the gender sensitivity when it comes to inclusive communication. Yeah, so that as we address issues around intersectionalist and multiple discrimination, we're focusing on the gender aspect with the technology and narrow down to women with the disabilities and technology, so that down and be able to address their concerns. As I move towards, because I want to I only have 14 slides, education and awareness program is one way that we should adopt, so that as we even come up with the framework that is going to be maybe supposed to be abided by the Kenyan citizen, we must ensure that we also come up with a framework to create awareness around it. ISCC, with support of partners led by the State Department of Social Protection, came up with something called the Disability Awareness Creation Booklet to address issues around stigma and discrimination. By show of hand, who has read that booklet? Mukono juu? You see, only 2. Yet you're supposed to be like the host of that document. So if we come up with something that is really viable, we must ensure that we create a lot of awareness around it. We must ensure that we have a mechanism to involve the community. Yeah, mashinani, because these are the real beneficiaries. For us, we able to access that information already anyway, but we working for the community so that we can be able to see how they are embracing it and also get the feedback from it. This will lead us to get what we call access to information for all, and it will spur what we want in ensuring that we comply with the Access to Information Act of 2016, where we have government and organizational transparency and ability to communicate to all. We have that law of access to information, and everyone is supposed to benefit from it. And this inclusive communication platform will actually be just supporting the compliance with that law. Key area that even Honorable Maura talked about is the dynamics of communication now. We're no longer waiting until 7 p.m. to watch news on Citizen and all those other platforms. Social media and other digital platforms, the X, they've come out strongly. So how are we going to ensure that these platforms really comply with the accessibility requirements so that all the information that we pass through these platforms are able to reach persons with diverse disability? So the practical tips for this is one, let's create multi-language materials. Very important. And I will show you, I have some practical sites that are not for us, international, the way they've done it. So let's create multi-language materials where possible. Provide communication in multiple languages to cater for diverse linguistic groups. Secondly, let's always ensure that we caption and give subtitle videos. Let's caption videos, let's caption pictures. Every time you post a picture, we need to caption it so that a person who is not able to see it will know via the screen reader through the text. Let's use clear, simple language. We avoid jargon. Tusiende hiyo side ya Professor PLO Lumumba. Isaidi. We use clear, simple language, particularly in government communications or health campaigns or education campaigns. We're having CBC, and we not seeing materials around CBC implementation, focusing on learners with disabilities. And if they are there, I think they are not enough. Let's engage diverse communication channels, use a variety of platforms, such as radio, community gatherings, social media, written, to ensure information reaches different sections of society. Always we should have a feedback gathering mechanism so that we continue to improve on the accessible platforms that we have. We need to begin by first developing a communication strategy. So I don't know if that is what we're going to come out with from this place, that we have a communication strategy. This strategy should determine your communications strategy goals. We should be able to define our target audience clearly to understand them. We diverse and we really need to know our audience. We need to assess our current state affairs, what we call situation analysis. What is the current situation when it comes to accessible communication platforms? We need to decide on metrics and milestones. I'm a career project planner. That's what I did for the first 4 years. And when you're coming up with a new project, you come up with a path. So this path, we need to find the critical path of where we'll be able to get now the end results of where all persons with disabilities, at least the majority, are able to access, perceive, and use the information that is available. Let's identify our communication channels. Let us assign ourselves and others as owners of the messages. let's assign message owners, and of course, let's create a work plan. Basically, we know that we need what we call inclusive communication policy guide as one of the output from these meetings. And this inclusive communication policy guide should be able to define for us the purpose. So we must clearly come up with the reason why we're having this communication as a purpose. We must be able to define some of the key things that we want to achieve. Yes. So the key definitions when it comes to inclusive and accessible communications, we are supposed to identify them so that we can be able to define them for the people. Even as we prepare to have a final inclusive communication policy, we need to identify who is supposed to be bound by inclusive communication policy that we want or guide that we have. Who are the beneficiaries? Who are the key people to benefit from that? And of course, before we come up with the policy priority actions on inclusive communication, we need to put down our situation, the current state of affairs, so that we can be able to list down our strength, we list down our weaknesses, and now we come up with policy actions that will address the challenges that we have for all of us. Then, of course, we commit with the policy statements. We assign ourselves responsibilities, beginning with the OGS and NGCC. What is their responsibility? What are the responsibilities of other government players? The ICT Authority, the Ministry of ICT. We have the Association for PROs, the Association for ICT Officers. We engage them, we give them responsibilities. We identify all key stakeholders and assign them responsibilities. Of course, we need to be guided down there with the existing legislation or regulations that we have. If the existing regulations have a gap, then we need to see mechanism of how we're going to lobby for those regulations that might need some a little bit of revision, or we wait until they are due for revision for us to ensure that we have a sitting on the table. They be revised to address a situation. I will quickly, I wanted to share these three. This is my very last slide. I just want to share the Kenya Project Information Management System.net. I wanted to show it, but something came up. I will just go to Gary.info. Gary.info as my area of interest. Gary.info. Gary is Global Accessibility Research Initiative, if I'm not wrong. Yes, this is Gary. Gary is Global Accessibility Reporting Initiative. These are global things. They say they help consumers to find a device with the accessibility features. Many people don't know this, yet it is very important for us to know it. We can advise. It has features for, we say no. It has features for phones, tablets, mobile application, connected wearables, smart TVs. And you're able to see good features for people with hearing impairment, those who can't hear, those who can't see. It has it gives you the devices that have the ability for people with visual impairment to use. Those with speech, those with dexterity, and those with cognition. So this is a platform that is there to ensure that persons with disabilities have the gadgets that can allow them access information within that gadget. A very good initiative. When you check on this website, you will see that it has the sign language interpreter there. You click on it, it gives you the platform of like it is showing what accessibility means. It defines what this institution does. Why do manufacturers of mobile phones care about accessibility? How accessibility is built in. So it provides actually basically the details of this institution. This is a case study where we can encourage institutions, for example, to have something where you to be able to provide this. You have key announcements, all key announcement side. It goes a long way. So this is a platform that does not only offer that, it also offers this information in different languages. We have English, we have Arabic, we have Danish, we have Dutch. You see all this, paka Chinese hapa. You click on it, it gives you quite a number of details in Chinese language, the way you see. So this is an example of that diversified kind of approach that we want. And if we can have like websites done in only 3 languages that are common across English, Kiswahili, and sign language, it will go a long way. That is my first example. You can find time and go through gari.info. It will go a long way in checking the phones that are most accessible, are good for persons who can't see, who can't hear, and so on, mobility issues, with the details around that. The other site is a funny one. I picked juiced.ac.ke. JUICE is Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University of Science and Technology. And Bondo TTI.ac.ke. I just want to show you the way these 2 institutions have tried to ensure that the mandate through the service charter is signed and captured. And we will learn something from there, because many of the government institutions now are doing that. So if I go to JUICE, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University of Science and Technology, I go to maybe, I know where their charter is. It is here. Unaangalia hapa chini, it has service charter in Swahili, in English, and in audio and visual version. I click on it. Of course, it has also this accessibility by user way. When you click on it, you're able to change the background, expand the font, you can pause the media, and so on. And many institutions have used that to ensure that persons with disabilities are able to access. Let me click on that Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, on that sign language interpretation, which is meant to
Oginga Odinga University of Science and Technology Service Charter. So our commitment on service delivery is: we are committed to providing timely, efficient, and effective service delivery to our clients by doing the following. For admission of students,
I didn't want to show you. You can always find time and look at it. Many institutions have done that. So this is a good one. And they say the landing page, mainly the landing page of the institutions are now accessible because of some regulations around that. And it is very important because with this, you summarize your mandate as provided in your what you've committed to do. With this, you can hear, you can see the text, and you can see the sign language interpretation. So the same has been applied to Bondo. They are neighbors. Bondo Technical, let me just look for it. So Bondo Technical is here. I go to the service charter. Then we have that, Then I find this lady, the sign language interpreters.
Welcome to Bondo Technical Training Institute Service Charter. Vision: to be a world-class Technical Training Institute in the provision
People are complaining.
of technical, vocational,
The experts are complaining.
entrepreneurship training and research.
So, let me pause from there. They don't want to see it.
They have said it's low quality interpretation.
Yes. So you see, these are two government institutions driving towards ensuring that they, of course, comply to access to information, ensuring that service delivery is for all. And the commitment is to have their service charter conveyed to everyone. So basically, you find that anyway, this one, of course, they might have complied maybe during evaluation or assessment. But first, you really see that like it is not the accurate signing. Hajakuwa mzuri sana, hajahitimu. Ako sawa? Okay. Then we don't have now the other complaints. We can hear the audio, we can see the sign, but we don't have the captioning. And also the color, the contrast, and so on is not up to the standard. So the reason why we must have this conversation here and at least to come up eventually with the regulations, if for us to harmonize, we have Kenya Sign Language, we have these audio platforms, they should be able to meet the threshold of what the ear can take, what we are able to see comfortably and so on. And that's why we really need this discussion, ensuring that we address, harmonize the situation, and we give guidelines that many of our institutions and many of us are able to abide. Thank you so much. I maybe have taken a little bit of much time. Asante sana.
Let's appreciate Daktari once more.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have you learned something? Thank you. How many people in the room are interacting with any training on disability for the very first time? One person? Fungue roho. How many people have not, probably not confidently defined disability in the room? It's only one person. Oh, one person? Who else? Who has not been trained about disability in the room? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. 9, 10 people. Okay. That's a significant number. Here we are. All right. I want to make the presentation broader because inclusive communication goes beyond. And there's something I really want to engage with you. Try as much as possible to, I can turn this off. Yes? The speaker. I really like moving when I'm presenting, but today I think I've gotten a curfew. I try as much as possible, being a good dancer as well, to try and move a bit from here as well. I hope I'm towering enough here. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll move very fast to inclusive communication. A significant number of people have my profile, so I'll not talk about the bio, and you can access my information. So let me talk about inclusive communication, but I want us to first understand these issues. That there are some particular terms that are different, and you may assume that they are universally known. For instance, there's a difference between minority, marginalized, minoritized, especially those three, and then I'll talk about something that is very important within disability. It's actually a term that came from feminism studies. It's called critical studies by a scholar known as Kimberly Crenshaw, intersectionality. But minority refers to numerical size. For instance, globally currently, according to WHO, 16% of any population has a form of disability. So 16% out of 100 is what Sustainable Development Goals calls the largest minority. So it's a minority, it's less than half. So it's minority. Marginalized, according to the Constitution, and also within the context of disability and human rights, it refers to the exclusion and disempowerment of groups. For instance, when we say persons with disabilities are excluded from full political participation. So we can actually say they are marginalized. When we say in the Political Parties Act 2011 and Elections Act 2011, special interest groups and persons with disabilities become invisible within that broad nomenclature, then it means they become marginalized. That's why currently 21 counties don't have MCAs with disabilities. Move from 7, 17, 21. Minoritized is something that I request you listen very carefully, because this means when social and political processes that construct a group as minority, even though mechanisms of oppression or through mechanisms of oppression or disempowerment. For instance, during colonial times, even if Kenyans were the majority, they were minoritized. During the apartheid time, let me give an example of South Africa. The black population controls about 4% of the land, but they are the majority. So we can actually say, when it comes to land ownership, they are minoritized. Women in Kenya control agriculture in terms of food production, but they are not the majority owners of the land in this country. So when it comes to land ownership, women are minoritized. When it comes to numbers, they are majority because they're about 52%, almost 51% population. But when it comes to land ownership, they are minoritized. When we talk about intersectionality, we means there are diverse frames of looking at disability beyond disability. For instance, a woman who is a pastoralist in Marsabit County and who is an El Molo has a different dynamic from a woman in Nairobi with disability. Because you find someone is an El Molo, a minority community, an indigenous community that is already marginalized as a community. But then you also have disability. So you find layers and layers of social categorization. So when we are planning for disability, even when we are reporting, even when we are communicating about disability, we must see persons with disabilities in their diverse intersectional frames. So that when, for instance, you're talking of a person with physical disability who is in an informal settlement, has different mobility difficulties than a person probably in Kileleshwa, right? That is now where intersectionality helps us. So when we understand that foundation, then it becomes easier to plan and to be inclusive in communication. But then, according to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is a global universal law passed by the Community of Nations, states, which we are privileged, Dr. Samuel Kabwe, a person with so much respect in this sector, was very much involved. Jenga moja kubwa, elekeza kwa daktari, apata heshima nyingi ambayo tunampatia. Disability, according to the current Act 2003, which came before the passage of the convention, was limiting in definition. But I want us to understand that when we talk about disability, we mean long-term physical, mental development. So, this is not the medical model. The older act, which we are just about to repeal, is actually a medical model-based disability that views disability as, quote-unquote, a problem to be cured. So I want you to understand, even when we are communicating, when, for instance, we say disorders, and I know Fatma is very keen on this, and we are communicating about cerebral palsy. It is the Cerebral Palsy Awareness Month, and today is the Global Down Syndrome Day. So let's appreciate the courage and the conviction of every person with Down syndrome and every family member of a person with Down syndrome. So when we describe cerebral palsy and we use words like disorder, then we're using the medical model. Why is this important? Because communication is very important in framing people's behavior. For instance, long ago, you used to see adverts of HIV/AIDS done where it was framed as a very scary scourge. You remember? But now we say you can live positively. Communication helps people deal with stigma. So I want you to understand that communication is very powerful, even in influencing human behavior. So what we communicate shapes narrative and perception of a community. So when you use words like beneficiaries, which is very common for a lot of you organizations or persons with disabilities, that is not a human rights model communication. You use participants or partners. So when you say we have beneficiaries, unless you're in the charity model where you're here and they're here, then there's a problem. Yet Sustainable Development Goals talks about partnership for goals. So we should, anyone working with persons with disabilities, unless you're in the medical and charity model, then you should see someone as a passive recipient of support, then that's okay. But the human rights model is not to see a person with disability as a passive beneficiary of support, but a participant who is also influencing what they want and what they don't want. If I was in a church, that should have been a club. Makofi ya kilo. But then I want to show you something very interesting, that when we use this language, we capture disability in diversity. But in the coming law, new law, Persons with Disabilities Amendment Bill, not amendment, it's a new bill, so it's repealed. To Persons with Disabilities Bill 2023, we have even gone further to expand the scope. I know some of us were involved in some of these issues. And it goes, allow me to just move because persons with disabilities includes persons with long-term physical, mental, intellectual development or sensory impairments, including, so the new law goes into actually listing, including visual, hearing, or albinism, that is not mentioned in the convention, which in interaction with various barriers may hinder their full and effective participation in the society on an equal basis with others. So when the new law comes along, this is how disability will be defined. Why am I saying this? Because the law has gone up to third reading in the National Assembly and it has passed. And now we are in the mediation committee of Senate and National Assembly and harmonizing. And I shared a document which some of you saw, amendments that were done at the National Assembly that improved the original act. If you haven't, then I can share. I had analyzed what actual improvements were done by the National Assembly. So when you look at it, there are diverse models. That is the medical that we have a serious problem with, where you see disability as a disease to be cured, impairment. Charity model, where persons with disabilities were seen as objects of charity, and this is a retrogressive model. Social model, where disability arises from the interaction between the individual and the end. It looks at attitudinal, social and physical barriers that limits persons with disabilities from participating fully in the society. So we see persons with disabilities as rights holders, which is very important. Of course, human rights model is very important because we have the Act coming up, the new one. We have the protocol, which Kenya was among the 15 countries that ensured that the protocol, the African Disability Protocol, came into force. So it's now applicable. And then we have the convention. So we have a robust human rights regime in this country that guarantee the rights of persons with disabilities. So that's the human rights model. So let me now get into inclusive communication. It has been defined. So earlier by Daktari, but let me mention something that I want you to look at inclusive communication beyond identity, so that you also look at gender dynamics, you look at abilities, you look at even age. I want to give a very good example. When you use easy read communication, you imagine it's only applicable to persons with learning disabilities as well as intellectual disabilities. But there are 17% of Kenyans are illiterate. 17%. So meaning that is also an audience for easy read. Right? And I'll be showing you the numbers. When we talk about accessible surfaces, we don't just look at persons with physical disabilities, we also look at the elderly. So when we do this, and it's something that Honorable Senator Maura says, it's not a favor, it's a right. And there's so many people who can actually benefit when you do things right. And I want us to really look at it beyond that. So, because you know the laws, I'll not talk about some of these have been mentioned, Article 35, Access to Information Act, but I want to tell every organization or persons with disabilities here that as per Article 35 and the Access to Information Act, you need only 21 days to access information from any government entity. And when that is not done, the Ombudsman ensures that you receive that information. And a lot of government agencies have and should essentially have a format of them sharing information. If you go to the Communication Authority, for instance, you can see their access to information framework. How can you access information? That includes budgets. How inclusive are we in budgets, for instance? So these ones are issues that you already have interacted with. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, UNRSPD, African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is the protocol. Article 9 of the African Disability Protocol. So, but then I want to show you the numbers that I was talking about. We know the dynamics about the population and census for persons with disabilities. So I'll not get there. So if we apply the UN, the WHO estimates of persons with disabilities being 16% of any population in any country, Kenya being one of it, and the latest published census number projected by mid-2024 by KNBS, 52 million, it is possible that persons with disabilities in this country could be, I imagine, even more than 8.4 million people. It's 8.4 million people. Then, so to pick a hesabu, I want these arguments to be used in advocacy, by the way, that this is not a favor. Now, World Bank says 17% of Kenyans are illiterate. When you play with that number, they come to about 9 million people. When you add those two numbers, you realize 33% of Kenya's population actually miss out when we don't provide inclusive communication. Simple mathematics. Mepiga hesabu, mwalimu wa maths, melewa hesabu. Because 16% of the population, then add the number of people in this country, according to WHO, who have illiteracy. Add those two numbers, you're talking of at least a third of the population of this country can actually miss out when we don't provide inclusive communication. It is that serious. It is that serious. So this is, okay, let me just get to key pillars, the content of the matter. So when you think about inclusive communication, you have to think about the sender. Where is the information coming from? Then, messages. People forget this. Framing. You can have the best tools, the most communicative website, but you have the wrong frame. You're probably telling people about medical model in your messaging, and you have the best, most accessible website, but you're sending the wrong message. Right? So we have to think about inclusive communication in its broadness. For instance, framing. How do we frame messages around persons with disabilities? How do we frame messages? Even around politics. Honorable Maura came up with a bill known as Political Primaries Bill that was even looking at language. Every time we go close to voting, very offensive language is used by politicians. If you look at the bill, he focused to address that. And I want to give an example, and allow me with humility to just use this example because I've had it being said by politicians. No, let me not use it. It may offend. But I don't want to amplify what they've used. I don't want to do that. But I know, Honorable Maura, there are instances where statements were issued from the office, from even Kedipa, challenging honorable members for offensive language used in this country. So if that person who is disseminating the wrong information has the right medium, then you're sending the wrong information. Are you helping? No. So we also have to look at medium channels so that we look at platforms. Is it website? Is it apps? Is it podcasts? Is it a public baraza where we don't think about something known as reasonable accommodation and support? Is it media? Is it social media? There are various channels of information. And then the recipient, who is receiving this information, so that when you talk about simplicity of language, especially for easy read and a larger font, then you have very simple language. Sometimes I've had people in this sector speak very complex languages, depending on where you are. What is some of that language that we've used? Feedback, ensuring that whoever is receiving information has a way of sharing back that information. And it looks like this: sender, message, receiver. When there is a breakdown of communication, then there's noise. So there has to be message and the channel that disseminates information. That's what is called a two-way communication model. For a two-way communication model, a lot of people don't imagine about the receiver sharing feedback. People forget that feedback is a very important aspect of communication. But then, when you talk about diversity of our media, so that even as OPDs, even as government, when we communicate, what do we see? We have what is called legacy media, such as print newspapers, such as, let's say, Daily Nation. When we have broadcast media, such as TV and radio, then we have international media. That is falling under what is called legacy media. I want you to understand diversity of media. This is where it gets interesting, because there is what is called digital and online media. A lot of people in this country are actually getting information from that one. Digital and online media. So it could be platforms such as Tuko. You're finding a young person with a camera and is a full media house sharing information in this country. That is where it has gotten. And they are even breaking exclusive news in this country. There are a lot of exclusive news broken by one person with a camera in this country. So that is where we are. Podcast. In this sector, we have a podcast known as Disability Sausage Media by Mugambi. You know Mugambi? You know Neurodiversity Nation, that is actually made by Dr. Sylvia Muchabo. So even this sector is starting to get podcasts. But then, community media, people rarely engage this community media. Community media is not vernacular media. Community media are stations like Mathare, Koch FM, Radio Mangalete, Wajir FM. In fact, Radio Mangalete was the first ever in the country, back in 1983, if you don't know. That is the first community radio station in the country. Community radio stations are not commercial. They usually broadcast within a region. If you want to reach Kibera, you use Pamoja FM. If you want to reach Korogocho, you use Koch FM. There's another one known as Mtani. There's another one known as Mathare FM. There's also Ghetto Radio and Ghetto FM. One of the Ghetto FM is a community radio stations. When you go to a country like Isiolo, has 4 community radio stations. Wajir has 1, because they broadcast within a short frequency. So when you're working in particular areas, you probably may not need national media stations. If you're targeting a selected number of people in an area, you need a community radio station. They are even in West Pokot. If you go to Marsabit, there's Angaf, there's C5 FM, among others. Then you have vernacular media. This is what people confuse for community media, because it's the likes of Ramogi, which are actually national, the likes of Inoro, CAS, among others. So this one a lot explained a lot, diversity of communication channels. But what I want you to understand is that when we talk about inclusive communication, don't just think about media and websites alone. Think of even a public baraza and how we communicate and how we do what is called reasonable accommodation. Ensuring that if there is a participant in a public participation forum who needs a sign language interpreter, then ensuring that such a sign language interpreter is there. So that is what we're talking about. But then, allow me to talk about framing and representation. That media framing, how you frame messages, is very important in this sector. Anyone who communicates about disability must understand media. For instance, there is what is called negative framing, where probably you project. I want to give an example. Wale watu wasiojiweza. How is that framing? Isn't it bad? But have you not had that in this country? tuwasaidia wale wasiojiweza, walemavu. That is negative framing. And someone may be meaning well, wasiojiweza, and some other language that I cannot use. There's usually some preachers who, before they have a conference, they write. Allow me just to use this example, because you'll see it even next month. So that is negative framing. But there's what is called solutions framing. That every time we are telling stories about this sector, we are also trying to provide solutions. It's very important. So take home, this is what I was talking about. How are we representing persons with disabilities? Are we presenting them as beneficiaries, passive recipient of support, or are we presenting them as participants or partners? Partners is a human rights model. Participants is a human rights model. But beneficiaries is a charity model. Because then it means I am here, you're giving me. Then I don't have a say of saying I want or I don't want. Then one of the things that is important is that we also have to look at what is called structures and systems, the second principle, so that you look at a very important principle of inclusive communication. I'll not dwell a lot because it has been mentioned, of accessibility. Accessibility. By the way, you see some interesting debates in the scholarly human rights space, human rights law space, whether accessibility is a principle or a right. You find it in the CRPD, it's a principle, and sometimes it gets mentioned somewhere as a right. It's a good discussion, but it's actually a very important principle. When we talk about accessibility, is ensuring all persons receive communication irrespective of their age, disability, gender, among others. I want to expand this. That's why I wanted to expand beyond disability, so that people understand easy reading information is also enabling that hidden person in Turkana who may not have gone to school to read and understand. For instance, if you're an organization of persons with disability and you want under Data Protection Act 2019 to get consent from a person who probably has not gone to school in, let's say, Marsabit, you present a photo of a camera instead of writing a very long passage about how they need to provide consent. You provide a camera with an X. Now that is easy read information because they can see photos. So that is what I'm talking about. That I want you to understand that when we do inclusive communication, it benefits a significant number of people in the society. For heaven's sake, from our mathematics, 33% of Kenyans will benefit from this. And more are candidates of benefiting from this, because we all pray that we get old at some point, and maybe there'll be visual difficulties for different people. There's sometimes what is called low vision, which potentially that is someone who would benefit from a website that has contrast. I'll not talk about web content accessibility guidelines that has been mentioned before, but I want to show you something that Enable did a study and realized, and as I said this, reflect on your own website. How many are in this room and the websites of the organizations, tufungue roho, and I'll pray for you, and the website of your organization does not even have the disability icon? Kirosafi. 1, tufungue roho. Who else? 2, who else? 3. If we are to become disciples, let the discipleship start here. That these are the biggest accessibility gaps in Kenyan websites. For instance, keyboard access. Users cannot access some of the interactive elements using a keyboard in our websites. These are the 5 main that were identified. Number 2, color contrast. Majority of the elements of the page do not contrast with their backgrounds. Imagine for a person, let's say with albinism, who's trying to look at a document, a website, then good contrast, maybe like grayscale, good contrast would be great. And I want you at some point to look at the website of KRA for there. Okay. And look at on the top right 3 icons that they have for contrast. National Council, I know, has done a study, and they ranked KRA as among the most accessible websites in the country, and even the same organization as well. But just go to the website on the right, look at those icons that play with the color beyond the disability icon. Contrast, color contrast. Number 3, focus visible. Most of the interactive elements do not visually indicate when they receive focus. You know the way you provide an icon, it shows, but they are not responding. So for a person who is not able to see the image, then you don't know what is being pointed. That is something very important. And then bypass blocks. The pages did not have a skip to main content link to bypass the repetitive content and pages that are not marked with landmarks. That is what is called navigation. If your website, someone has gone to a certain area and is trying to go back to a different area, and they have to repeat so many icons, then it's a problem. That is what it's saying among the 5 main access issues that were emerged. Focus order. It is not logical as users use the keyboard to navigate the pages. And imagine a lot of content nowadays we are accessing with a phone, and potentially the person may not be able to use the keyboard of the phone. So then how are you navigating? So let me just continue. Of course, this has been mentioned, issues such as braille and tactile graphics. Tactile graphics convey non-textual information to persons who are blind or visually impaired, and it include tactile representation of pictures, maps, graphs, diagrams, and other images, so that a person with a visual impairment can feel these raised lines and surfaces in order to understand images, and also what you call larger format and larger font. Very important, especially for those with low vision. Tactile graphic, allow me just to move here. So a person will be able to touch the surface, the material, and they'll be able to feel some elevation and be able to feel what that is. I want to show you a sample of easy read. For instance, and let me explain this image. The convention, the CRPD, is an agreement between countries. When you have an agreement in Kenya, it's a what? It's a handshake, right? Now you're awake. Handshakes. So when you present a handshake, potentially someone will know these people wamesikizana. It has political nuances in Kenya as well. When we say rights are things that should happen for everyone, when you show everyone, for instance, IEBC, when they're doing communication, and they show you a collar here, it means who? They collar the priest. When they put a hat, they show you a Muslim, the kanzu, and the kanzu, or the buibui. Someone may imagine that's a Muslim, right? When you see someone in a dust coat and maybe some needle or something, you'll imagine it's a doctor. So easy read, large font, and use of a lot of pictures. This will then be ideal for a person with intellectual ability, a person with learning disability, or even a person who has low literacy level, probably hasn't gone to school, especially in the last mile places in the country. I know we talk about accessibility and reasonable accommodation. I don't want to assume. Accessibility entails the design, modification of environments, products, services, and information to ensure that they can be used by all people, including those with disabilities, without requiring special adjustments or accommodations. It is about making sure, for instance, that the built environment, digital platforms, and public services are used by everyone. Accessibility. When you talk about reasonable adjustments, we are meaning specific adjustments or modifications made to voter registration or voting process. How do we ensure that information is? So inclusion of diverse populations, technology and innovation for inclusion, where we actually integrate technology, for instance, real-time captioning, sign language, translation apps, and text-to-speech technology to make public services and communications more inclusive. Another issue, ensuring that persons with disabilities themselves, what we are actually doing here, and organizations of persons with disabilities, and to use the language of the convention, persons with disabilities and their representative organizations are actually participating in shaping the policy. By the way, what is going to come out of this meeting, this engagement, is that we are going to provide inclusive communication guidelines that will shape government communications as well as even our own engagement, because we are all part of the communication framework because we are recipients and participants. I showed you the whole cycle. So we are going to develop guidelines. And part of what we were asking ourselves when I was actually imagining, the SDG Clarion Call says no one should be left behind, but also partnership for goals. Can there be a Kenya Inclusive Communication Caucus or a network that draws other players, so that we fully expand this and become a global benchmark? This country sat in the committee that gave the world, they actually co-chaired the world, the SDGs. This country organized together with UK the first Global Disability Summit. This country was among the first 15 countries in Africa to sign the African Disability Protocol. We are trailblazers in the country, in the world, when it comes to inclusion and persons with disabilities. Can we pioneer a benchmark together in this, when with your support and participation, so that we give the world a global benchmark for inclusive communication? Do you believe if that's something that we can do in this country? Yes. How many are born again as far as that is concerned? The altar call. I'm not calling you here to get born again. Okay, appreciate yourself. And the best practice, something that we mentioned, clarity and simplicity. I'll not emphasize on that. That has been mentioned before. What I was talking about, messages and channel adaptability. Ensure that you have different formats, such as easy read versions, braille. Imagine a young person in an informal settlement. Ghetto radio may be ideal. Channels may actually also include murals and graffiti. For instance, peace messages. Let me give an example. Anyone who's been to the pastoralist regions, when you want to do what is called behavior change communication, you'll understand, you'll probably do the lessons with messages. They'll probably be more effective than a TV station, right? There's another thing that pastoralists do. Every time they are going to a water source, they ask, kwenye umetoka kukoaje? And I can see my friend laughing because he knows what I'm talking about. So a lot of decisions in pastoralist communities are actually sometimes made at the watering hole of their camels, because they are discussing what is happening where you're coming from. Imagine an area like Samis or North Horr, 39,000 square kilometers, which is 3 times the size of Central Province, almost 5 times the size of Western Province. Covering such an area, the way message passes is that close to water sources, people pass information from one person to another. So if you want to pass information around access to justice for pastoral communities with disabilities, you may actually find you probably need to put graffitis and murals and then street champions near water sources. It will probably be more helpful to you than using TV, national television station, for someone who is not even near a town, a major town. I mean, you move from Marsabit to Turbi, 120 kilometers, and there is no other major town. In between, you're not seeing people. Small manyatas. How do you use TV in such an area? So adaptability of information is very important. Sometimes community radio, because it broadcasts within a certain area. So I would use Radio Wajir in Wajir than a national TV station in Nairobi to speak to a person from Wajir. Then I would use Sifa FM in Marsabit and Angaf in Marsabit, and then Radio Wajir and Radio Rendile to cover that whole region, rather than a mainstream radio stations in the country and I'm not reaching that pastoralist. You get? So how fragmented do you become when we communicate and in certain contextual regions? So that Mangelete is those sides of Kitui, for instance. Ghetto FM. Pamoja FM was very effective in passing peace messages in Kibera, and I actually did a study on that during the post-election violence. Pamoja FM. And when a child gets lost in Kibera, they are taken to the radio station. If people already trust it, then can you use it for, and it's not commercial based, can we use them to reach a huge number of people? Diversity. So look at diversity. Look at the words that we use. Wasiojiweza, what I was talking about. The need to prepare people who are even coming on TV and radio stations to talk about disability. Which language are they using? What is the country getting to know about them? So this was mentioned. Person's first language, empathy. This is usually forgotten, that we demonstrate empathy and sensitivity to the experiences and difficulties, challenges, and need of others. There was a mistake that was made, and this is just an example for here, when there was a conflict and people complained at some point, there was a conflict at Dusit. If you remember, the guy who came to speak on TV for the first time was saying, when you see a terrorist, face him, fight the guy. So it almost came like whoever is affected did not fight enough. And people really trolled these guys until he apologized. He was then heading disaster response for government. So sometimes communication may not show empathy without knowing. So every time maybe there is a disaster, start by recognizing that people are affected, for instance, and then pass the message. But if you speak before showing empathy, then people may not connect with you. For instance, tunajua hali ni ngumu, lakini serikali inafanya mikakati kadri iwezavyo kuangamiza makali ya njaa, hasa kwa wafugaji, walemavu na wakongwe. So appreciating that you don't say you understand, but you say you know. Tunajua. It's not you understand. You may not understand. Tunajua hali ni ngumu. So that is empathy first. Then you pass the message. But you cannot come and say, the government is... So how are you appreciating that people are actually affected? So that is very important. Even for organizations or persons with disabilities that are in what is called crisis and humanitarian communications. Remember the African Disability Protocol talks about situations at risk and why it's important that we are inclusive even in communication. Person first language, I'll not emphasize that because it was mentioned, but when communicating about people with persons with disabilities, focus on the individual rather than the condition. E.g., a person with a disability instead of a disabled person. So language is very important. I know a lot of people use persons living with... I know you see that a lot, for instance, which is a serious, inexcusable mistake that we should not allow. So what language are you using? So there's need to develop mechanisms to assess the effect.
Hi.
Yes.
Okay, this is Sarah Bosibori. I wanted to ask a question that many of us, I didn't really say my disability, but I'm autistic. I'm on the neurodiverse community. And I would like to ask, so how do we amplify our voices on social media as PWDs, involving the national government, government communication center, so that we may create impact and inspire other PWDs? Why I'm saying that is because my journey as an advocate started on social media. I started off as seeking support through support groups on Facebook and WhatsApp. And it allowed now, like from that now, it opened doors to other opportunities. So that's my first question. And the second one is, how do we create cognitive ICT programs in schools, colleges, that will lead to employment? If there is, how do we improve the recognition of that program? i.e., I know that UDPK have had soft skills training, basic ICT skills. And then there's the neurodivergent in tech, which is in Strathmore University. I happen to be an alumni from there. And there's also a program on NITA, in NITA. Yeah.
This one is the one that is scaring investors. Yes, thank you very much. There's nothing as powerful as storytelling. Every time I train about persuasion, I say persuasion works when you speak to the heart, speak to the mind, and you have credibility. One of the most persuasive ways of communication is actually when we share our stories, speaking to the hearts. And that's why you find every speech that Barack Obama had a personal story in it. One of the things that I would really want to encourage the sector is that persons with disabilities should tell their own stories. Should that not be a clap? And that's why I don't like it that we don't have as many podcasts for persons with disabilities. In fact, I only know 2 or 3 or 4. There may not be as many. But because digital platform is such a free platform and very powerful, I would really challenge every person to consider that. I want to give you an example. One of the amendments in the Persons with Disabilities Bill 2023 was actually moved when a person with cerebral palsy engaged Senator Sifuna. Out of that, in the current bill, there is a clause that says persons, families, caregivers are actually entitled to at least 10,000. I think it's 52, Article 52. Or no, Clause 52(6) of the current bill. Persons with disabilities, the families of caregivers basically, will be getting at least 10,000 when they qualify, when the guidelines are met. Do you know that amendment was actually proposed through Twitter? Yet, we had gone to all these public participation meetings. When Sifuna was engaged directly, he pushed that in the bill in the Senate. And now it will become law, potentially supporting so many people in this country for a very long time. The power of social media. So, and all what this person did, and I wish I'm able to get those screenshots, was to share her experience as a mother of a child with disability. I mean, she didn't need a presentation about rights. Kenya, you know, we are entitled because CRPD says, no, just her story. The person who redefined HIV/AIDS in this world was a young boy known as Nkosi Johnson, who addressed the UN General Assembly, and as a very young boy, and the world took note, Nkosi Johnson. And that's where a lot of global attention was shifted to HIV/AIDS. He was a South African. Storytelling is very powerful. I would really encourage persons with disabilities to tell your stories. And because social media platforms are free, you're not paying like mainstream media, then we can take advantage of that. Number two, we can form communities that are able to amplify stories of each other. So that if someone has said, if you, for instance, Bospori, you've given your story, there are like 100 people who have retweeted your story and it is read by more people. So that we support one another for wider reach. Because that is how we'll be able to shape narratives in this country. So let persons with disabilities tell their stories, and don't worry about complexity of storytelling. Just tell your story in your language, the best way possible. You never know who may be following up. The next issue is about like ICT college and the fact that probably they may not be known. But I know there are some emerging centers, like let's say the iHubs, the Strathmore, that are also trying to create some solutions and applications for persons with disabilities. Maybe part of what we need to do, and this is potentially an area that could be supported. I know the UK8, when I was the MC at the National Council dinner recently, I think you saw someone known as Juma from UK8, who is supporting a digital skills program up in Mandera. So there are already some actors who are supporting some programs around disability and ICT. I know some organizations or persons with disabilities that are part of a network known as Kiktanet. You probably may want to join part of that program. I know another network known as the Gifted Community Center is running a major ICT program in this country. I know Ford Foundation is supporting some of technology solutions for persons with disabilities. So there are emerging centers, but we need to amplify them. Some of them may actually not be where you may imagine. One of the biggest employers for young people and technology is actually in Turkana, and people don't know. If I ask you about roaring lions, you'll not know about it. But it's in Turkana, and people don't know about it. Recently, we went there with the ICT authority. It's called Roaring Lions. There's another one coming up in Marsabit that will be among the largest cities in the country. And disability is going to be one of the areas of access. There are things that organizations like Riziki Source are also doing. So I think we just need to map, probably Safaricom could be of help. We just need to probably map people who are creating solutions for persons with disabilities, especially around innovation, and see how they could be supported, maybe some incubation, maybe some accelerators, programs, because there's some, kuna watu young sana wanajituma, creating solutions. So many solutions, but probably they may not be getting as many opportunities as possible. Okay, thank you very much. Yes?
Yeah, thank you. Mine is to ask whether it is possible, because we work with women with albinism, and is there a budget that can support sunscreen? Because when we have budgets for persons with disability support, we are not able to access, because what you are saying about access to information and budgeting, at the community level, at the board administrator, they don't give you that information. And when you push hard, they even victimize you and some of them. So that is one challenge. Another one is the budget allocation, like the AGPO percentage. The persons with disability, especially the women, don't get. The proxies get it in the name of the persons with disability. This is really a challenge at the ground. Thank you.
Honorable Dr. Maura, is that a question you're able to answer around? Yes.
Expecting a communication question. And the lady never introduced herself. Maybe you can also tell us what's your name. Yeah.
Sorry, my name is Jane Wasonga for FIDIPA, working with women with disability.
Okay. Yeah, I think there is a free sunscreen provision by the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. I'm the one who designed that program, so it's already working well. Sometimes it's caught up in these procurement problems of government, but it's already doing very well. It provides sunscreen lotions to over 3,000 people every month. Of course, given out in batches. But now that you have given me the microphone, I think it's important, Simon, we think of how we can bring all these efforts together so that we learn from one another. So possibly as we finish this session of Q&A and we break out for lunch for about an hour or less, when we come back in the afternoon, we go to the breakout sessions, but the outcome is to come up with inclusive communication guidelines. And then we come up with a working group. And then when we come up with that working group, then we can create a network so that we validate the guidelines, and then we combine them with the minimum, the accessibility standards that Dr. Kabue spoke about from the Kenya Bureau of Standards. And then we use that to now train and reach out to government communicators, if you can call them that way, the public communicators in the ministries, departments, and agencies. So it's a partnership that I'm looking at, as a vision bearer, that we come up with guidelines because this is our own product. That's why it's more in-house. That's why we have less government, other than my office. But then after this, we come up with those guidelines, we combine them with the standards of KEBS, and then we now form trainings. And I'm saying this because I've already written to the department, state department that is in charge of performance and delivery, so that in the performance contracts, we have a communications indicator. And one of the sub-indicators will be inclusive communication, so that then we make sure that government is responsible. If we're able to secure this, we'll be able to have anchored this properly. And further to it, we are also still fighting for disability mainstreaming to be reinstated as an indicator. We had a very, very serious argument at the executives of the president, where I work under the head of public service, and instructions were given to reinstate disability, gender, and HIV and AIDS. Because you see, we can't say that now we are at par with others. In fact, we are very far away. We are only 1.53%. And part of the reason why we are not there is because there is no inclusive communication. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes?
My name, as I said, I'm Orpo God, and I want to talk on two areas. First, I want to thank you for the content that you've taken us through. We are not the way we came. And I want to talk on one area. First, this is the area about the different models on disability. If you look at our work, most of our work, we are really not at even the social model. We are working with persons with disabilities, but a lot of times we are looking at them as people who are being given. So I think these should be strengthened in terms of communication. People working with these people with disabilities, we should move towards human rights. And that means also a lot of advocacy on working towards human rights, so that persons with disabilities themselves also feel that they are people and they have a right to whatever they are supposed to be at a level, especially now on inclusive communication. That's one area. We are still very far. Some are still calling people with, like medical, they are sick people, majority. So how we as people are working with, I've worked on all areas of disability for inclusion. But one thing is that persons with intellectual disabilities are also still being marginalized. They cannot even move in the society. If you are seen, it's like you're somebody who should not be in the society. So I'm glad that we brought in the easy to read. And one example I want to give that has worked so well is the toilets in hotels. You simply see it and you see the picture of a woman. And how do we develop more easy to read so that persons with intellectual disabilities can also be part of the inclusive communication? I think those are the two areas I wanted to talk about. The models, and these are just comments. I hope we are going to do something about it. The models and also persons with intellectual disabilities in terms of inclusive communication. Thank you.
Yeah, the best way that I usually explain these models is that if maybe a surface is not accessible, maybe a road is not accessible, you don't tell people, buy a 4x4. You'll be sorted. Buy a 4x4. Sort the access. They will sort themselves. If for